Ms. Gilbertson, thank you very much for speaking with us here in Baselworld.
It's my pleasure and a great privilege.
Thank you. Almost a decade you've been co-creating the story of Fabergé. What message does the brand developed in 1842 bring to the 21st century?
So I think in many respects Fabergé is all about taking a little step backwards, moving away from the world of mass luxury, and instead focusing on producing very special pieces that bring the charm and the romance back to the art of creation.
And 2016 is a big year for Fabergé, as your pearl egg marks anniversary of Imperial Egg's 100 years. Congratulations. And what is the spirit of these eggs, and how does Fabergé celebrating this milestone?
As you may know, Fabergé completed 50 eggs for the imperial family. There were in fact 2 eggs that were not completed in 1917, and today of the 50 eggs that were completed, we are aware of the whereabouts of only 43 of them. So that means that 7 eggs are still missing. Those items today, one of the 7 missing eggs, are probably worth anywhere between $15 and $50 million per egg. So you have one of the world's greatest egg hunts remaining in the last 7 eggs. Clearly those items are phenomenally special. And although people generally recognize those eggs as being what they associate Fabergé with, most people don't know that Fabergé made more than 250,000 individual items before 1917. And so those 50 eggs are of phenomenal importance, not only to Fabergé pre-1917, but also in terms of what we do today. And so we've been very careful to approach the making of our first imperial class egg in 2015, being the pearl egg, with the requisite design skill and the requisite craftsmanship in order to do appropriate honor to that category of egg. We're delighted that that was very successful. It received wide international coverage, and gratefully it was sold very soon after it was unveiled.
Fabergé has always been about surprise. What is the surprise in the egg that you already mentioned?
The pearl egg contains an extraordinary Gulf pearl, grey, very unusual, which comes from the collection of the Alfardan family of Qatar. They are one of the greatest pearl families in history, with one of the most remarkable collections, and it was a great privilege for us to work with them, to source from them a number of the pearls for what became known as the pearl egg. And so when the actual leaves of the egg open up, a little bit in a way that's reminiscent of an oyster, mounted in the middle, you see the spectacular Gulf pearl.
And how long did it take for producing such a masterpiece?
Well, that item was designed entirely internally by our design team who sit in London, and one of our very talented young designers who's Finnish, called Lisa Tallgren, spearheaded the project for us. And if I take the design period and the craftsmanship period into account, it was 18 months of work to complete it.
What is the value of the egg?
The value of the egg, when it was unveiled at the Doha show in Qatar in 2015, the price was quoted as being somewhere between $2 and $3 million US, which today is a relatively modest sum for an egg in the imperial category. Of course, it is not intended to be an imperial egg because there were only 50 of those made pre-1917, and therefore it does not have the same value because obviously it's not more than 100 years old. The last of the key eggs that came up for sale at Sotheby's or Christie's at auction was not an imperial egg, but one of the very few eggs made for a private family, and it was made for the Rothschild family. And that egg was sold at Christie's in London on King Street in 2007 for $19.5 million.
Since its inception, Fabergé eggs have been created for a purpose of a certain occasion or dedicated to a certain person. Every egg, as we already mentioned, with its own surprise inside. How this trend is also alive nowadays, exception the pearl egg that we already mentioned.
Well, so the element of surprise is still core to what Fabergé does today. Sometimes we get the great honor of making bespoke pieces for customers, and they can be hugely individual. And to give you a good example, we had a client who had the name of a special somebody in mind, and they wanted us to create an item that would essentially have a code that spelt out the name of that special someone. And the approach that we took was to get a series of gemstones and minerals so that we would use the first letter of the mineral name. So for example, in emerald, it would stand for an E, in ruby, it would stand for an R, and in sapphire, it would stand for an S. And so we were able to spell out the name of this special person for the customer using different gemstone types. But the challenge was that one of the letters was an X. So can you think of a mineral like an emerald, ruby, or a sapphire that starts with an X? And so that was a big challenge for our team. We had to find such a mineral, and then we had to physically go and source it, and then craft it to make it a part of this piece. And so today that particular customer has something highly individual and custom-made for them. So those are the greatest products for us. But obviously in many of our other products, we try and introduce the element of surprise and also try and individualize them where we can. So many brands today may not be willing to make a small change to a product for a customer, introducing a slightly different color so that the client gets something unique. We're always very happy to do that. And we have here at Baselworld 2016 unveiled a very special watch which we call the Lady Levity. The Lady Levity is inspired by a clock made by Fabergé in 1908, which in the center contains some rock crystal, which when you look at it shows the face of the moon. And so we've created a very special watch, and in the center of the watch there's a special technique where you probably will have seen the moon face this morning, but the unique aspect is we can make the center of that watch absolutely bespoke on a customer by customer basis. So for example, if the customer wishes to have their favorite palace in the middle of the watch, we can put a picture of their favorite palace in the watch, and that essentially allows a Fabergé customer to have a totally unique piece made for them.
And what is the price?
So the Lady Levity containing the moon face retails for $21,000. But in order to totally customize it so the customer has something unique, even with a word or a picture of one of their children, the price goes up only $3,000, and therefore the totally bespoke item is $24,000.
And finally, Mr. Gilbertson, can you tell me what is the message that Fabergé is delivering in Baselworld 2016?
So I think in a world that has become so fast, so complicated, and so noisy with so many brand messages and so much competition, I think Fabergé stands for just pausing for a moment, putting down, in some respects, some of the new technology, taking back to the center, focusing on things that are special, charming, amusing, surprising, and that ultimately we want to bring a smile to the customer, either externally or internally. And we're very proud of that message.
Fabergé's founder, Peter Carl, became legendary for his ability to work with precious materials. So how do you translate his passion in the watchmaking world?
So that's true that Fabergé was very famous for mixing materials and only working with precious materials. So in our watches we work only with gold and we don't do any steel. And we always take the inspiration in Fabergé archives, which are so rich And actually, this year, for example, we took the inspiration in a Fabergé table clock, which was done by Peter Carl Fabergé in 1910. And this table clock was very special because the hands were not coming from the center of the watch, but it was a peripheral indication of hours and minutes. And actually, the idea of the watches that we do today is as well to always have a Fabergé surprise inside the watch. And that's why we really did a new movement only for Fabergé with really the highest level of watchmaking and with the Geneva Seals level. But in order to translate something very simple on the dial side, and here the idea is really to have decoration, so a screw on the back side of the watch, allowing us to be able to put a very heavy decoration in the center of the watch. And this time we have done the link to the past by translating this moon that was represented on the table clock. But this moon is very contemporary for our new watch, and this moon is only visible for the person wearing the watch. And this is something very special, and we can really personalize even the center of the watch and imagine that someone is putting something very personal, like the face of a child or the horse that they love, or something very special to the people.
This is really very unique and rare technique. So where does it come from?
So actually, we gave a brief to the supplier because we are always working with workmasters, as Fabergé did, and the brief was really quite complicated because we would like to have this moon face in the center of the watch, but in the same time, we don't want to really see this moon. So we have really worked on a new technique, allowing us to have really just the face appearing when you play with the light, and this is everything about Fabergé, the surprise and the unexpected.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Much focus this year has been put also on the men's watches. So what is the inspiration behind and what kind of the men Fabergé is addressing?
Fabergé is really addressing to, I would say to all type of men. But for example, we have this year the Fabergé altruist because our watches are quite understated, but in the same time using all the highest technique that you could find in the watch industry. So we have our new watch, which is very classic, but with all the little details that makes it like a Fabergé watch. For example, like the crown with the winding. So the design has been inspired by the winding mechanism that you could find on Fabergé automaton. Plus, we are always working with traditional technique, for example, which is the enameling that you have on the dials. And the enameling this year really gives this deep blue that you have on the watch dial. But as well, we can do something more technical and very masculine, powerful, with a small complication that we have introduced this year for men. So this is again the Fabergé surprise, and the Fabergé surprise again is in the center of the watch. But this time, the Fabergé surprise is a second time zone. So in the middle of your watch, coming from the back side of the movement, you can see from the dial side, only for the person wearing the watch, a second time zone. So that's something. Fabergé, for all the new watches development, has to be really everything about surprises. And even in this watch, you have more than one surprise. This is like the numeral in the center, the rotor, which is on the dial side, and that you can only see if you move quite in a subtle way your watch. So everything is really, a new world when you have a look to Fabergé watches.
And you also come up this year with some unique pieces, also of a special material mix.
Exactly. So we always mix different type of materials. Our design allows us to play with different type of materials. And this year what is really particular is that thanks to the movement that we have created without hands in the center, we have the opportunity to work on rough emeralds, but in a non-traditional way. Thanks to gemfields, because Fabergé is part of gemfields, we have access to a really beautiful rough emerald, and we would like to highlight this beauty on our dials. So for example, on this unique piece, you can really see in the middle of the dial, this is not lacquer, this is really a rough emerald which has been carved and which is mixed with a snow set of emeralds and diamonds. And I think this is quite unique in the watch industry. And in order to do this dial, you go from a rough emerald which is 104 carats. So it's really something which needs days and days to make sure that the rough emeralds won't be broken.
And how long does it take, for example, for produce such a masterpiece?
So first of all, you have to find the right rough emerald, which is really even for us part of gem fields. It's something quite unique because you have inclusion and you have exactly to find the right color. So that could take quite a few weeks in order to find the emerald. And then when you find the emerald, in order to make sure again that you use exactly the best part of the emerald and that you don't break it. For developing this watch, we needed like 5 to 6 months. So that's why this is really unique piece, yeah.
And the price of the piece?
So the price of this unique piece is $245,000.
Thank you very much, Ms. Picot. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It was a pleasure.